Well, I'm joined now by Gerard Lyons, who was Chief Economic Advisor to Boris Johnson in his second term as Mayor of London. You were an advisor also in his first term. Quite interesting, before we start talking about Boris, one of the things we just picked up from Tom Harwood, who spent the afternoon on College Green, in terms of what do Tory MPs want now.
Yes.
And they want a new leader, a new Prime Minister, who's for lower taxes, less emphasis perhaps on some of the green stuff and a bit more pro-growth. I mean, you helped train Boris in economics. What did you do to him? Because he wasn't very conservative, was he?
No. Since he's been Prime Minister, I think there have been some major achievements. He did get Brexit done, but Brexit is a process, and even though we've grown faster than Germany since 2016, there's many things that he could have done, and indeed the next Prime Minister still needs to do to realise the opportunities. He actually did very well on the vaccine rollout.
Yes.
And also he was the first Prime Minister, maybe for half a century, to really take regional economic policy seriously. The downside and the biggest challenge, in my view, has been that he didn't have an economic vision, and therefore the Prime Minister, Boris, didn't stand up to the orthodoxy of the Treasury. And the Treasury's orthodoxy is, I still think, one of the biggest challenges.
Are they that powerful, the Treasury? I mean, but I'm just thinking this through. Look, you're the Prime Minister. You've just been elected with an 80-seat majority. Do bureaucrats tell you what to think and what to do? Harold
Wilson, when he was Prime Minister in the late 60s, said that you can be in office but not in power. Power lies with the Treasury. In other countries, the two offices that are in the Treasury are split up. That is, the Treasury has a budgetary department and an economic department. But the budgetary department, balancing the books, always takes precedence over achieving economic growth. They don't actually balance the books that well. So I think the biggest challenge for the Prime Minister, or Boris, over the last few years has been his lack of economic vision. I think whoever succeeds him needs to really have a pro-business, pro-growth economic agenda, and that needs to be aimed at some quick wins to address the cost of living crisis. We have both an inflation problem and an economic slowdown that's about to hit us.
Stagflation.
Well, some would call it stagflation, but it is part of both of those. But the trouble about calling it stagflation is that often the policy response is to squeeze the economy. What we actually have to do is to have a tighter monetary policy to get inflation under control. And we need to have a fiscal policy aimed at boosting the economy, and that has to mean tax cuts, giving back some of the revenue that the Treasury, the government, has got in through higher inflation. So there has to be
in fact, the tax take has been a lot higher, hasn't it, than they anticipated?
Hence, many people are now being pulled up into higher tax bands. So I think there is a lot that can be done. And indeed, were the Prime Minister not to have been kicked out this week, my impression was that he was finally trying to get on top of this, albeit 2.5 years too late.
But economics never Boris Johnson's strong suit.
That's right. Yes.
You worked very closely with him.
Yeah.
You obviously liked him when you did work with him. It's a pretty tough day for a guy like that.
That's right. Well, I went from being head of research at a global international bank to then working with him in his second term as Mayor of London. What I found was that he didn't take easily to economics, but we would have regular meetings and he would sit down, get out his book as if though he was a journalist and go through things. And some people said that he didn't do detail. I found quite the opposite. Maybe it was because of the environment in which we operated. For instance, one occasion I remember talking to him through the banker's bonus cap, and at the end I said, "Do you get it?" And he said, "I do. It's like when Emperor Diocletian decided to try and control the price of vegetables in Rome." But he was a very, very good guy to work with. He was very personable, had great following. On international trips, he really promoted not just London, but the UK. And there were some good stories from that as well.
Gerard, if you manage to get Boris Johnson to do detail, it's a very great shame you worked with him. I think over the course of the last 3 years, we might have been in a slightly better position. Final thought on all of this, but important thought on all of this. Do you think today's modern Conservative Party has the courage within it to go for the kind of economic policies that you're talking about? Because I'm thinking back to Thatcher's time, when she had the Treasury against her, the media against her. I mean, the academics against 364 economists wrote to the Times.
Yes.
To do the things that you're talking about is going to face real opposition. Do you think that this party has the heart to do those things?
Yes, I think it does, provided it has the right leader and provided it actually realises it needs to be very much appealing not just to people who work around here, but very much out on the front foot across the country. It needs a credible economic vision. I would call it a three-arrowed approach: monetary, financial policy, credible fiscal policy, but the whole supply side agenda. And again, reiterating the earlier point, is about pro-business, pro-growth, and actually recognising that you need to actually have some quick wins for people to address the cost of living crisis. But
so 5% cut on VAT on people's fuel bills would be an easy, quick hit.
I think that taxes on fuel and energy should be reduced. I think corporation tax next spring should not be increased, and there should either be an income tax cut or an increase in the personal allowances. So it's possible, but it requires the leadership to actually be looking at these issues. And one clear thing from when Boris was Mayor of London, and I think this is evident in terms of how international people see him over at Ukraine, he very much focused on boosting Britain, realistic in many respects, but at the same time, instead of talking the country down, it was very much about positive about what needs to be done.
And that was one of the great things about Boris Johnson. The boosterism, the optimism, and he was good at that. Gerard, thank you for coming in, setting out a vision that the Conservative Party, I think, need to follow. And wow, what an achievement. I mean, this man, Lyons, got Boris Johnson to do detail. Well, I've never heard anybody else ever say that at any point in time.